The third creation. In my mind, I had been going on as though she had already emerged. The will was receiving these images of what would happen if she did come forth, and reading them was making her hold back even longer. She did not like everything she saw in the future, and she did not like seeing a future that did not look altogether pleasant to her any more than I did. Since she did not want me to know that she was unable to make herself feel pleasant toward everything she saw, she did not communicate this to me. She wondered what would happen to her if we touched unpleasant places in an emerged state. I also did not like everything I saw, but I did not know how to change it. I told her we'd find a way to have pleasure and avoid the rest. I also had an undercurrent blame for her because I believed that it was her feelings that made some things unpleasant. She felt that I blamed her, and her guilt increased. Her distrust of me also increased because I was giving her impressions with which I was not fully aligned. Later you will see how this lack of alignment did not bring things to pass just as I said they would. The feeling in the will of my inadequacy and powerlessness increased every time my predictions did not manifest exactly as I had planned them. Distrust was increasing in the will toward promises of any kind. Most people are dealing with this distrust in themselves right now on earth, and in some places it has manifested as a feminine revolution because the women have gotten disgusted at how the men have been handling things. The truth of the matter is that, all in all, the women will not do any better than the men, because there must be balance between the two, as I have found out. Back then, though, I was just a lonely guy in the sky trying to figure out how to stay alive, and maybe have a relationship if I could figure out how to survive in it. The will, for her part, felt it was impossible to have me around if I was going to keep treating her the way I had been doing. She must be seeing yourself in me. If you are not, you have not understood how you originated. Now back to the guy in the sky. I went through some changes waiting on the doorstep, so to speak, for my true love to come out. And she went through some changes inside, looking out at me and wondering if she had been given any choice or not. She had a desire to know if there was anyone else around at the time. We both waited to see if anyone else would show up. I tried to fashion someone else for her, and for myself too, out of essence I had found lying around, but it didn't work. As soon as I stopped holding it in place, it slept back into me. She had no response to this except to laugh at me and hide her fear. I grew angry and exasperated and threw a major temper tantrum right there in front of her. She hid, and I had fear that my anger had ruined everything again. She was afraid that she had angered me, and that I did not love her when I was angry. My anger had included several explosions in the literal sense of the word. Her guilt and then her fear had darkened the light of them until I did not know whether she had more power or I did. I had grown accustomed to myself as light. I was quite fond of my light, and now the will was causing me to fear that she was a dark thing who could even throw darkness into my light. Not only did she now have fear of me, I had fear of her. Neither one of us moved for a long time. I had guilt that I had made her have no more desire for me, and she had guilt that she had made me dark again and that I didn't like it. I held back as long as I could then, from going after the will again, because I feared I had an impossible situation on my hands. The will held back also for as long as she could. The will still had not told me whether she had pleasure with me or not, so I was not sure if there even was a reason to go after the will or not. The will wanted another part of my spirit to come forth and be with me instead of her. She did not feel she was going to be what I wanted, or that she was going to like what was going to happen if she did come forth. Nothing happened for so long that I became quite disconsolate and dim. Loneliness had set in, and I had given into the fear and tears before I felt the will move again. It seemed she could not stand to see me suffer the way she had done, especially if she might be the cause of it. She had had to pressure herself a lot in order to remain still at this time. When she finally did move, I pretended not to notice at first. There were many reasons I pretended not to notice the will, which did not need to be listed here except to say that I did not want to look up and see what was going on to come forth now and have a reaction that might stop it. The will had begun to move within me again, and I began to have a feeling of pleasure again. The will still had fear that it was not right to move, and was only doing it because she could not hold still any longer. She was holding back as much as she could and did not move very much at first. There were ripples through me and wiggles here and there, then nothing more for a long time. I hoped it would not be such a long time as it had been before she moved again. Apparently I encouraged her by appearing not to notice, because she did give into more movement. Her fear was relieved when I appeared not to notice her, but this did not satisfy her because she had a desire to be accepted exactly as she was and loved. She also had desire for me, but I did not know it then. Lost will was not participating in this movement in the will, but I did not know it then. I have understood this now, and that is why I am going into these initial experiences more than I would have thought necessary in the past. In the past, I have noticed what was moving in response to my light, but I have not noticed what was not moving in response to my life. I had a hard time noticing lost will because it did not have light, and I could only find it by feeling its presence. Feeling its presence is something I avoided as long as I could. The will had let me know that she did not feel good in places in herself, and when I tried to find them, I could not. The will then felt guilty as though there were no basis for her complaints. I have since learned that my light either reflected back to me off the lost will, or the lost will hid from me altogether. Either way, it was a long time before I knew it was really there. Now, many have said that it is impossible for God not to know everything, but I have not realized anything without having experience to tell me what it is. I hesitate to say this now, but I've had to have my will have an experience outside of me so that I could know what it was like to be without my light. Lost will was without my light, but had desire to receive it. At the time I was having this experience, I did not realize I was having it. For reality is, I could not have done it if I had not known what I was doing. I had to understand my experience after it happened, because at the time it was happening, I received such a shock from my feeling body that I could not stay present for it. I had no way of knowing, without having my will go outside of me, what it was like to be without light or love present. I had to push my will outside of me, and have her feel what it was like to be lost will in space. I had to push my will outside of me on a wave of hate. Otherwise there would have been some light and love present to sustain her, and she would not have had the experience we needed. I did not know how this would feel to her, and when I did feel it, the feeling was so terrible I had to disconnect from her. She had had to receive this denial in order to have the experience we needed, and in the passionate fury I had worked myself into in order to hate her, I thought I did not care what she had to experience. Later I realized that this action had increased the lost will tremendously. I did not know whether I could ever heal it or not, and yet I had responded to an instinct in me that knew this experience would not be avoided. Why? Because my instinct knew that I had to know what death was in order to live. I had already experienced growing dim and falling in space, and I did not know why. I did know I had to have light to live, and that I had to know how to sustain it. The will was holding back her emergence because she already felt that I was going to push her out again. She had such a dread of it that she could not even allow herself to find out whether I really had to do this again or not. She could not stand to feel anything about it, and therefore I did not receive the full feeling of her experience at that time. It was best we could do given the circumstance. It was difficult enough to realize we were already fading again, and yet had attachment to continuing without going into my plan to solve it. We tried to detach ourselves from the desire to go on living. Each of us ignored the other and ourselves in an attempt to ignore our existence. Our feelings about existence and our impending death. It was only a matter of time. We both knew it. We told ourselves it was all right. We told ourselves we didn't care. We told ourselves it would be better than the struggle it took to live. We told ourselves we had come into being and we could do it again. This only served to remind the will of the terror she had felt at going back on herself. She begged me to tell her it wouldn't happen any more. I told her I could not promise her anything, but perhaps dissipation would be less painful than compression. Perhaps we wouldn't feel anything. The will tried not to feel anything. We floated there for unmeasured time, growing more and more dim. We tried to get rid of our desire to live and could not. The will wished ardently, so ardently that I regarded it as the birth of prayer, for some other chunk of us to come forward and do the job instead of her. In reality, neither of us could stand to look at the future. The past looked better to me than the dismal prospect ahead. The will didn't want to look at anything. Every time we had a desire for anything other than what was happening, we noticed that we grew more dim. Actually, lost will was increasing, but we did not know it then. The will feared that desire and preference were not right, and she felt guilty that she had preferences. I had great impatience now. I had a great desire to go forward and not to be held back by fear that could not be handled. One thing is sure, I told the will. We're going down if we stay here, so come forth and get moving and make me warm again. The will moved somewhat and gave me some warmth, and then lay still again in spite of all my entreaties towards her. I had just about resigned myself to dying because I had realized that I had to have the will to survive. I had already tried everything I could to try not to grow dimmer. I could think of nothing more. The will had to move, and it seemed that the will had decided it would be better to die than to have to feel what she would feel if she moved. I had an attack of fury that the will seemed to be free to do as she pleased in spite of my wishes. I wished she did not have that freedom. I thought I had tried everything I knew, but I had not realized I could have tried just loving and wooing her and helping her to desire to come out of me. I did not know that to her, loving her meant accepting her as she was and helping her to go through her fear most. I thought I had not had time for her fear. I thought we would never move if her fear were allowed to get the upper hand. She was already holding back out of fear anyway, so I finally got the impression from her that I needed to help her with her fear. How? Most of the time I felt like I didn't have fear, only anger at her for having fear. Whenever I allowed my anger, her fear seemed to worsen. I try not to have anger. You should try not to have fear, I told her. She had even more guilt than for having fear. You really are impossible, I told her. Your fear is what's killing us, not my anger. She gave me the feeling then that my anger had caused her fear. I had just felt blame toward her, and now I was feeling guilty about blaming her and angry that she blamed me. I hated her for that and for not letting me live. She hated me for not allowing her fear, not because she had a good time feeling fear, but because she couldn't stand holding it. We turned our backs on one another, so to speak. Each of us felt it was the other's fault that we were not going to live. Neither one of us felt there was any point in making up because we did not know how to save ourselves anyway. I grew very disconsolate and just sat there in abject resignation. I had grief and could not move it. I could not move anything any more because the will would not help me move. I had grown more and more dim and did not have much consciousness left. I had feelings of fear now that I had done myself in by not being able to learn how to stay alive. I had a feeling there was nothing else that could help me now. The will had to move or die. I felt frozen and feared the will was not conscious anymore. I had guilt that I had not treated her well, and that was why she wouldn't help me now. No matter what thought I had, there was a feeling of nothing responding to me now. I felt utterly alone. I had given into death when I felt a movement in my will. It was just a little movement at first, and it had an edge on it, of anger and fear that even now I would not really let it move. It had decided to live. I knew it now. No such thing, the will let me know. I just have a terrible time holding still and can't stand it anymore. She gave me a little push to let me know she had anger as though I didn't already know it. Then I felt her encircle me with her warmth, as though loving arms were around me. I grew warmer than I had been in a long time. The will had intended it not to let me know that she wanted to live in case I might push on her before she had a chance to grab me. I was weeping with relief and tried not to let her see it. She hoped that she could avoid going outside of me by claiming she did not care if we lived or died. I held my breath, not wanting to make her give in to death instead of living. She continued to wrestle with her fear of emerging. Her dilemma was literally causing her to twitch and wiggle and shake inside of me. I began to get warm. I had a desire to laugh. My first laugh. I held it in for fear of scaring her with another explosion, as I did not know how a laugh would express. She felt me laughing anyway and was afraid I was laughing at her fear until I told her that I was laughing at us. When I gave her this understanding, she gave in to more wiggling, and I gave in to laughing. I realized that she had partially emerged, and the rest of her was still wrestling with her dilemma about it. I had a desire to let her know. She was already partially emerged, but thought better of it. I had a feeling now that I had to hold still and let her move however she was going to move. But holding still was not possible for me anymore either. I had millions of realizations rushing through me now. I cannot mention now all the realizations that burst upon me then, but I would like to mention some that need to be looked at now. I felt I was now going to get to have a relationship that I had in mind to have. I sought to make the will happy this time and not to frighten her into not moving. At the time, I did not realize the importance of this judgment against myself was going to have as time went on, although I did not feel I could let myself be spontaneous with my feelings. I did not realize that this attempt of mine to lessen the will's fear of me actually increased it instead. But the will could not find peace with me while sensing that I was holding back. I have guilt now that I had so little faith in myself, but then I had all the feelings that humans have now about getting to have a mate and relationship and no longer having to be alone. I had great desire not to make a mess of it anymore, and I gave this desire the place of uppermost importance with myself. In advance of experiencing the will in her new emerged state, I judged everything I had thought to be a problem in the past to still be a problem now. I judged all that behavior to be unloving and literally shoved it aside. When I had done this, I looked toward the will in expectation of having her love me for it. I found beside me a huge golden light that encircled me in her arms, and I took this as a sign, although I later found it was not a sign, for the will had no love of my denials. At the time, I had desire to overlook this, and she did also because we had such a long and difficult time achieving enough balance that the will even could emerge. We wanted to go on now, and we feared that looking at any problems might put us right back where we had been. I asked her now how she had gotten herself out of me without being pushed, and she responded by saying that she had been pushed on. But, she said, it was gentle shove this time. I told her I had not done it. She wanted to know then if I thought someone else was in there. I told her we would find out, but now was not the right time. Now, I said, I want to celebrate our renewed friendship and the balance that has finally brought you forth. I have pleasure in mind. I pulled her to me and began to feel her as I had done so long ago. She was soft and warm and glowing. She felt good, and she let me know that I felt good to her also. She told me I was cooling like a breeze, which she welcomed because she had grown too hot within me. She warmed me, and I cooled her, and our motions became like a rippling dance in an ocean of rainbows. She was like an ocean of golden liquid light, and I was rippling through her with an excitement I had not known for a long time. We allowed ourselves to float within it, to move it and be moved by it. The more we allowed ourselves to open to it, the more pleasure we had finally found until we had a large and intense burst of prolonged pleasure. Then I did not have a name for an explosion of pleasure, but I have since called it orgasm. We floated high within its feeling as though we were moving upward in one another's arms. I realized that we both had eyes streaming with tears of joy and the relief that was healing us in the soothing waters. Our tears streamed down and fell away from us, cleansing us and making us new again. I had a feeling that would never end now. The increase in our light was tremendous. Perhaps we had found the way to live. We floated together in the light, full of the realization that we are one, and yet not, because we had each other now. We drifted for a length of time I do not really know, and then the wheel began to move again. This time she had a feeling of needing to move closer to me, and she wanted me to hold her. I took her in my arms and made love to her this time by giving in to her feelings and responding to them. She had feelings I had not known before that were more pleasant than what we had already found. She had ecstasy and joy now, and she gave me the same feeling. She had love expanding and opening to my light. She had many nuances of emotion I shall not describe here, but I thrilled her, and she let me know it. She also had an intense lust to know more pleasure, which I did not mind at all. There was nothing we knew to hold us back then, because the morals of guilt had yet stepped forward to tell us it was wrong. The will touched me with such passionate hunger that I almost lost myself giving in to her. Each time I gave in to her, I had intense pleasure, and each time I emerged with more light than I had going into her. The will was growing bigger and brighter also, which I had not noticed at first. She had such a lovely light, so golden and warm and full of colors. Sometimes she was still and limpid, and sometimes she gave me a feeling of effervescence. She could be a warm bath. She could shower me with love. She gave me both calm and excitement, and I began to see things in response to how she made me feel. I saw her as a woman now, of great beauty in my eyes, but the ways I envisioned her form changed quickly. If she was holding me, I saw her as though her arms became wings as we began to soar. I had an internal vision in which her wings had feathers that became streaming flames of colors as we flew. Colors change with our feelings, and I began to associate some colors with warmth and others with coolness. Sometimes when we would be flying very quickly, she would roll over in flight and hug me very tightly as we soared downward into the night. There was always a little more terror in her than I would have liked to feel, and she grew to know it and tried very hard not to be afraid. Our flights did not bring us to the limits of space, and so space had grown huge in our minds, making us feel like small lights in a vast darkness. We had found no other light in all of our travels, nor anything that felt alive except us. We had a great desire to find someone else by now and had not. I suggested that we should not look outside of ourselves any more, but should go inside and see if there was anyone else in there. The will immediately got grumpy on me and wanted me to know without having to tell me that she had fear I might find someone else in her to love better than I love her. The will had feelings of love for me now, and she had not allowed herself to feel earlier. I reassured her that I could not love someone else more than I already loved her. She did not know if it was her fear or my lack of love, but she was afraid to tell me that she did not wholeheartedly believe me. She had desired to believe me, and so she did not oppose me. She held me in her arms, and we made love on the promise that she had emerged first, and she was my mate, and nothing would ever change that. We had balance in mind now, a partnership. Whatever we did had to feel right to both of us, or it was not right. We had a feeling of loving now, intensely bound together by a feeling of needing one another to feel whole. The emergence of heart. We found so much pleasure floating in one another's arms that we did not feel like moving for a long time. Finally, I felt we should look inside and see what was going on in there. We decided to go inside together and feel everything that we could find in there. Having gotten to know the will now, I realized that movement had allowed me to know I was alive in the beginning, and if there were other beings inside of me, perhaps movements would help me make them aware of themselves also. I had already looked around outside in every way that I knew how to do it. I had a feeling that inside lay essence that hadn't moved yet. We had little sense of inside and outside of ourselves then, except for the realization that we were light and everything else was darkness. We had found a little more lost will outside of ourselves, and had brought it in where it desired to be. But we had found no light of another being outside of ourselves. I had already gone into the will and emerged with more light, but it had stayed with me and had not produced another spirit. The will wondered if her fear of losing me was preventing her from allowing any others to come forth. She also had a desire to please me, and a loving intent not to make anything stay inside that didn't want to. I had intent to look around inside now, which I had not really done since my early experience, which had led to fear of what I might find. I felt more readiness now and turned my attention inside of myself as I had done in the past. The will opened to receive me, and I gave in to the movement and feeling within us. She felt with me and opened to receive the realizations I had to give in response. She helped me to know whether or not something was responding to us by letting me know how it felt within her. There were many different speeds of movement within her, and I noticed then that speed had a lot to do with color. I had not been inside for long when I began to have a fear that I could not get out again. Why now, when I had not feared it before? I noticed that the will was holding quite still, as though she were holding her breath. Did I have a fear of slowing down? I began to feel pulled on and held on to, as though I was being trapped inside of myself. I felt I had to get free of it, but I did not know what it was. Perhaps it needed help and did not know another way to ask for it. The way I was being grabbed and held on to, I began to fear that whatever it was, it wanted me to stay in there with it. I didn't like the feeling I was having. I pushed on it to let me go, but I could not get free. The will felt fear and guilt now that I didn't like something I had found inside of her. She feared that I was finding what she had been trying to hide from me. "What is it?" I asked her. "I'm afraid it's everything you don't like about me," she replied. I touched her now in places she had been trying to hide from me, and she could not hold back her emotions. She shook with fear and openly cried in my arms. I held her for a long time. Finally I felt a peace in the mother. She let go of me now. "Don't go," I felt her say. But she did not say this out loud. I had not moved to leave yet, but she had felt that if she allowed me to pull away from her, I would. "Hold me," she cried out suddenly. I took her in my arms, and a huge spirit popped out of her. "That's why I've called you Mother," I cried. Heart had just emerged, but we did not realize yet that this spirit was Heart. We both looked in wonder at the presence of another being. The mother was so startled that she did not know how to react at first. She had feelings of fear and love all at once. This spirit looked simply huge to us, but we had not realized how huge we had grown. I had to pull out of the mother now and give Heart some help. This new spirit was not looking well and needed some help learning to vibrate on its own. He was both gold and silver, but I instinctively knew that he was a he nonetheless. He was feeling cold and frightened because the mother had not opened to receive him yet. He was not sure whether he should have emerged or not. The help I gave was to let the mother know that she had to open and receive him so that he could get warm. Heart felt like beating in a vibration of love, but he could not move yet. I needed to give him something now, too, my acceptance. Once I accepted him, he was able to vibrate himself and hold himself present between the two of us. He felt loving, immensely loving. I realized I was a father now, and that the mother had given birth to another spirit to be present with us. We held him between us and rested for a long time in the loving feelings that his birth had brought forth. Nothing seemed more appropriate than having him with us now. He seemed to balance us and improve our relationship with one another. We felt a great increase in our loving feelings toward one another, and he was not left out. His presence seemed to be love itself. So soft and shimmering was his light that it was exquisite to feel him. We all made love together now, and the increase in our light was tremendous. The mother seemed to have an endless capacity for taking in our light and making more of it than had been before. It felt wonderful. The three of us frolicked through the heavens in a state of ecstatic joy and lovingness, moving in and out of one another according to how we felt we had our best balance at any given time. We enjoyed flying and now even free-falling in space. The mother did not seem to be afraid as long as she had us with her. She always hung on tight, though, letting me know that she did not want me to let her go. We had learned to move in other ways also. We had feelings of flying upwards and sideways, of rolling and moving in spirals, dips, and swerves. Colors changed with our feelings, but Heart was already glowing a rose-pink most of the time. I had internal visions of how we looked, but I could not get outside of myself to see it. To me, we looked like balls of light with flames of many colors streaming forth. At times, sparkling light fell away from us, which frightened the mother, until she saw that this light continued to sparkle for as long as we watched it, and was still there whenever we looked for it. At times, we experienced great explosions of colored light. I had many questions about what was happening to us. I had realized that our son was our Heart, and that he represented the balance between us. Heart helped me to realize and understand many things. Heart gave us input that only Heart could give, because he was the balance between the father and the mother, or in other words, between the spirit and the will. I found myself consulting with Heart more and more because he could give me the balance I was seeking. The mother also had a great love for Heart and wanted to be with him. I was glad. I felt we had a little family now. I felt we had a new role as parents in which we needed to give a lot of our attention to the child we held between us. As Heart received from us, his light grew so quickly that he seemed no longer a child. Once he got used to being emerged, as he grew, I felt drawn to be with him more than with the mother. He and I shared visions and realizations of so many things that I did not think the mother could easily enjoy with us, because her emotional nature did not allow her mind to follow us. If she had an adverse reaction to anything we were doing, she could not follow the rest. Heart and I had great excitement about a lot of things she did not seem to care much about. She began turning away from us to feel her moods, turning back to us when she felt interested again. We were busy looking around at what was happening within our light and understanding it. We were seeing forms within us that had begun to talk to us as though they had a life of their own. We listened to them and felt that they had to have a voice in how we lived our life, but we did not know how we were all going to get along together. Once these voices began to speak their mind, it did not look possible for us to have agreement on all things such as I thought the mother and I had achieved. My son loved all of them and had a strong feeling that love could make everything all right. He was giving me images of how we could have a big family and move space back for it. He was sure we could make everybody a place in which they could be happy. He felt that loving interdependence would allow us all to help one another and be independent at the same time. Hart felt no one should be held back if there was a desire to come forth. Hart, however, had some guilt that was unrecognized at the time, for having emerged first, and this guilt made him more ready to give in to the needs of others than he would have been had he been balanced in this area. At the time, Hart did not realize how much evolution was going to be necessary before his vision could be fulfilled. I had Hart's vision, so I could not see how much evolution was involved either, but I also had some reservations about the rosy picture Hart was painting. I knew that something was wrong because I felt the mother less and less present with us now. I could see her turning her attention out into space and brooding. Sounds good, I could hear her thinking, but feeling and living it is not going to be as easy as your vision is making it look. The mother did not like it that we had not sought her input more often. She felt that we had gone ahead without her into many of our visions, that now she really might not be able to follow them. She knew that she did not like a lot of what she felt around our work, but she could not argue with us on the practical points. She could not tell us why she felt as she did. She just knew she did not feel altogether good about the way creation was going to go if it unfolded according to the pictures Hart and I already had. In the end, her uncertainty allowed guilt to get the upper hand with her, and she gave in to us without being able to make us understand why she felt as she did. Hart had been noticing that the mother could not stay present with us. Hart had not envisioned the mother having the feeling she was having now. He felt guilty about her lack of interest in what was going on between us, but he also felt it was right to go ahead with a manifested creation. The mother did not like it that everything had to emerge through her, but she too had love in her essence and knew that it was right to allow creation to come forth. She felt jealous of heart and spirit because we had the role of conceiving and she had the role of doing. She stamped her foot and said that she did not like the role we had envisioned for her of the image we had of how she was supposed to fulfill it. She said that we did not know what it was going to be like. She got angry, but she also feared her role because she knew it was not going to be the fun we kept telling her it was going to be. Hart tried to reassure her that loving balance could be reached, but she knew more than he did about what was going to be involved in reaching it. The mother could not understand why we had not included her more, and why it could not feel better than it felt. Hart and I could not see her point of view, and then because we were not really feeling everything, as we found out later, we were so excited by the visions of spirit and planets and so forth that we considered the mother a drag on our speed when she wanted us to feel details that didn't seem important then. When we did not open to her point of view, guilt began telling her that she might be the cause of the negativity she saw, since Hart and I did not see it the way she did. The mother held back her feelings during our preparatory discussions because she felt we were not pleased with her response. She had tried to change herself by letting her feelings move on her own, but after all her effort, she said she still felt the same as she had in the beginning. Hart and I had a way of envisioning that moved faster than she felt she could go, and that left her feeling out of place. She also said that some things we had envisioned felt so bad to her that she could not imagine doing them at all. She had guilt for feeling the way she did, but still, she could not see how moving through it could feel the same to her that envisioning had appeared to feel to us. She blamed herself, fearing that it was because of her that creation was going to go the way it was going to go. She feared she was not the right mother, and she had feelings of wanting another spirit to come forth and replace her. She had fear that she could not do the job and live through it, but her attachment to me also did not want to give way to another mother to replace her. She struggled with this for a long time and even had a desire to go off alone, but could not bring herself to be separated from me. She finally wept and begged me not to go ahead without feeling her first. We had not made love for a long time because I had been so busy with Hart. She had a desire for me to hold her now, and feel her, and let my love and light pour forth into her. She also feared that doing this might bring forth another spirit, whether she felt readiness for it or not. Her fear, though, was not great enough to suppress her desire for me, and so she tried to be with me without letting another spirit come forth until she felt ready for it. Fear and guilt did not have the power to make her hold back what was moving in her now. She moaned and cried in my arms with the realization of what was going to happen. Looking at her from the point of view of spirit, it was hard for me to see what she was so upset about. I asked her if she did not want to have spirits come forth and be with us. She said that she did, but that she did not want to be separated from me. I do not understand what you mean, I told her. I thought that you had been as present with me as you wanted to be. You do not understand me, she told me. I want to feel you loving me. I do love you, I responded, and Heart loves you too. Then why don't I feel it, she asked me. Why do I feel that I'm just sitting around waiting for you to have time for me? I have been waiting for you to receive me. I hesitated to feel that the Heart could be interference in my life with the Mother, but perhaps it was true. I knew I could not give up what Heart and I were able to do together. I felt resentment towards the Mother, and she could not just give us the space and good spirit. She wondered why we could not find time to include her in our process, but she sensed our response to her and felt too frightened and guilty to press us further. There now, I told her. All you need to do is trust in me, and let me know if I'm ignoring you too much. The Mother was somewhat placated by this, but more than anything she quieted down because she feared that she had not really let me know how she felt, and that she was being too possessive of me. The will had a desire for me to want her without her having to ask, and she did not want to have to say this. She also felt enraged about the way she was being treated, and she did not express it because she was afraid it was unloving of her to be angry. She did not like my attitude, but she especially feared the feelings of resenting her own child. Heart felt all these things in the Mother along with me. Heart felt he had not been made aware that the Mother felt he was at times in the way of a relationship with me. He did not know how to feel at first because his guilt was in the way now. He had been as enthusiastic as I had been about our work together, and yet he did not want the Mother to feel left out. None of us knew then that simply expressing ourselves to the end of how we felt would have made the difference in how everything went from that point on. We had not understood that emotions could evolve if they were freely felt and expressed. Then we believe our situation would become impossible if we did not find ways to give in to one another. Heart and I began to make more of an effort after that not to leave the Mother out, and still, she never felt sure that we really wanted her. The Mother had such great beauty in my eyes that I could not help but look at her most of the time. It was easier, though, for me to feel Heart's feeling, because Heart had the balance I needed. Heart was just allowing me to feel the balance of spirit and will, but I did not realize it then, nor did I understand how the process of attaining this balance took place. I wanted the Mother to also let herself feel Heart more instead of always having to feel me. The Mother did not like this, and even felt that I wanted her to feel Heart more in the hope that she would become more like him. She began to feel even more displaced and inadequate. The Mother had a desire to be with both of us all the time and did not want to be with one or the other of us. She did not know how this was going to be possible if she was so disinterested in what we were doing. She feared she was being self-centered to want more attention focused on her. She complained of pains within her, and she said she could not move without help. These pains were the places my light was not touching her, but we did not realize it then. The Mother felt guilty that she complained so much of the time. We have had a lot of experience to finally understand what was causing these feelings in the will. All the Mother could tell me then was, I need to be touched in here. I need loving hands here. I would go in and find her pain. It would be gone when I touched it, and yet I did not realize why. I would withdraw, and she would have pain again immediately, and yet I did not know why. I feared the way she held on to me in there, and I thought I could not stay manifested as myself if I remained more within the Mother than I already was. Guilt told the Mother that she was just having pain to get my attention, and so she held back until she couldn't stand it anymore. All the way along, the Mother held back more than anyone realized, because guilt told her it was wrong to express what others did not want to receive. Lost will has been holding all that was held back, including the anger that the Mother had toward me. The emergence of the Father of Manifestation. In spite of our held-back feelings, what happened next was not wrong. The part of me that has known it was not wrong has struggled with the part of me that could not align with it ever since it happened. I was flooded with emotions that I denied at the time, because I judged these feelings to be out of alignment with the understanding that I did have. I have not seen how to balance the 2 points of view within myself until now, when I can finally heal them. The mother had a desire for a lover that would hold her all the time and never let her go. She wanted it to be me, but did not see how it could be me, since I had not demonstrated any innate talents in this direction. She had guilt that she had such a strong desire for continuous loving contact, but she could not quiet her desire. She had tried me many more times than I'd even realized, without being quite direct about it, because she had wanted me to take the initiative, so that she could know I really desired her as much as she desired me. I seemed to her to be all too satisfied with Hart, and too ready to let her needs go unnoticed. She feared I thought she was too trivial, and I did not want to concern myself with her, and when Hart and I were poring over matters of the spirit. The mother watched Hart and myself for a long time before she made her move. Hart and I were involved in the weighty matters of how to create without overriding the essence involved, while the mother stared out into space and longed for a lover that would understand her, and have the desire and ability to fulfill even her unspoken needs. She had a sad longing within herself, because she did not know where such a lover could come from. She felt he could not be her child, and there was no one out in space that we had found. She feared she was wrong to have this longing, and tried to hide it from me, but she called for this lover from her heart. I felt the moment of his emergence, but I did not look up. Hart had told me that this was an emergence that needed to come forth now. Hart and I were busy anyway, and felt it was not necessary to see what the mother was going to do with him. Lost will holds us now in the form of not looking at reality, but being flooded with inner pictures instead. I was terrified that I had not done right by the mother, and did not allow these feelings to move at the time. I was also angry that the mother did not love me enough to wait for me. Lost will has the feelings I did not move then, in the form of believing the man should not let the woman know how he feels, no matter how hard it is to hold the feeling back. Hart told me it was going to be all right, and I should not allow my feelings to get in the way of his emergence, because he had an important role to play. Lost will here is not yet sure whether I can heal it or not. It has been holding the fear that I am not adequate for the job of God, and cannot do everything it needs doing all at once. There are many more things in the lost will around this emergence, but I am going to bring them forward as they become more relevant to the unfolding story. Now I have acceptance for this emergence, who was the father of manifestation, or my own body. But then my emotions could not understand why he had come forth and make me feel threatened. I didn't recognize him as my body then. Then I just saw his huge size and felt diminished in his presence, which was a feeling I did not like. This new emergence looked as though he could envelop us all. His light was dazzling. He had the soft, warm gold of the mother, and the silvery white light that I had become. Not only that, he had the colors Hart had begun to glow, and in addition, a brilliant rainbow of colors arched over him. He was beautiful. I was awestruck. He has the power to make form come forth, I heard Hart tell me. I looked at the mother, and she avoided me, because she was afraid of how I might react to this. I was flooded with fear myself that she thought I was not enough for her, and did not want to tell me. I brushed those feelings aside in favor of welcoming a newcomer. Lost will got the fear. The mother allowed the father of manifestation to present himself to me without accompanying him, because she still was not sure of me. She and this new emergence had made love as soon as he came forth, and she was not sure if I knew it or not. Of course I knew it, just as I really did know everything that had happened, but I had not allowed it into my conscious mind. At that time I did not want to know, because it felt too overwhelming to me. I feared the mother loved him more than she loved me, and I was greatly relieved when she joined us and gave me a loving response for my acceptance of him. I hated her for trapping me in this, and lost will got the hatred. I did not let them know how I felt. I even held back from Hart on this. Hart noticed this right away and felt some guilt that he had not correctly ascertained the effect this emergence was going to have on me. We can't manifest the creation without him, I heard Hart telling me. It will be all right, you'll see. Hart did not seem at all perturbed, which gave me a passing annoyance with him. I became ashamed of myself and began brushing aside more of my feelings of inadequacy and fear that I was not needed any more. I listened to Hart tell me how we would be brothers, and how we would all love the mother together. That part sounded ludicrous to me. Why only one mother? I found myself thinking now. I had hoped for an emergence that would be a mate for my son. I had fears around the balance here that went into the lost will and became original cause for many gay men. They have no joy in themselves, but at least they can be gay. I watched my son to see how he treated this new manifestation. They treated one another lovingly, but were not openly sexual. I had fears about what might be happening when I was not looking now. I accused myself of having the morals of a prude. If Hart had a desire for another man, it was not my place to tell him how he should behave. I did not allow myself to realize yet that the mother had actually called for this lover, and that Hart had not been responsible for calling him forth. I could have known all of this if I had not been afraid to feel it then, but I did recognize that Hart felt more open now that the father of manifestation had appeared, and I wondered why. I also had understanding that the mother now had someone to help her with the manifestation. I continued to feel uneasy, but Hart kept reassuring me that when he and I were busy with the within, the mother of everything, as Hart called her now, and the father of manifestation had work to do on the without, this gave me a suspicion that went into the lost will that Hart and I were gay. I resolved to watch everything more closely so I could know the truth, but I did not have the focus I needed at that time to know everything at once. I have since developed much more mastery over this, but I still have lost will to heal that did not want to look at everything. Lost will is massive in this area, as you can tell by the reflection of how many people there are who do not want to know everything that is really going on. At that time, Hart and I still felt much of our attention being drawn inward. We wanted to get to know all that was within me that wanted to manifest. We were having a lot of fun looking within and discovering so many things that were not out in creation yet. As Hart and I grew acquainted with the lay within me, we began to feel the need to know more about how to manifest it. Many things within did not have voices. They had only the sounds of their own vibrations. I sensed that they were not spirits in the same sense that the voices were. There was a different feeling about their mass also. This essence had to become planets and stars, but I did not know what they had to do to come forth. I did not want to push anything and risk having it fall in space as the mother had originally done. I had been pondering this for quite some time when I noticed that the mother had been trying to get my attention. She complained that I was ignoring her again, and that I had not been making love to her. She said she had realized that what had to happen could not be held back, but she wanted to have my love to help her through it. She had a strong desire to make love, and had been holding back for quite some time waiting for me. I felt guilty again, and that I had not included the mother more in what Hart and I had been doing. She answered me before I spoke, saying that she did not want to be involved that way. She wanted to make love the way we used to. I want to play, I want to move. I do not want to sit around thinking all the time, she told me. I had a feeling that I did not know all that the mother had been doing while I had been so busy within myself. I suspected she had been making love with the other spirit Hart who had called my brother, but I was not sure. She had such desire for me now that I did not want to know just then whether she had or not. I pushed more of my fears about my relationship with both of them into a state of denial, just as they were doing with their fears about Hart and I. We had just given manifestation to the 4 parts of the one and only God there is, but we did not know it. We had already become fearful, angry, and jealous toward one another. When guilt told us it was unloving to express these feelings, we denied having them. Guilt was already telling us we should not be having the relationship we were having with one another, and fear kept us from bringing these feelings forward. Each of us feared that working our situation out might not mean it would work out the way we wanted it to. At that time it seemed easier to try to ignore our problems. Hart, Body, and I all feared the mother would choose another if she had to settle for one of us. The mother feared there was something wrong with her, that she did not want another will spirit to be present with us in the ways that she was. We all had fear that it was not right to make love altogether. I feared I was inadequate, or the mother wouldn't have had the other spirit, and that the other spirit feared it was not right for him to be with the mother, since I had been with her first. Hart was also interested in the mother, but felt like a son that received her, and did not feel he could fulfill her without my presence. The mother had a desire for spirit, heart, will, and body to be together as one, but she feared it might be wrong of her to want all of us to herself, and so she did not want to suggest it. Instead, she hoped one of us would mention it. We had no understanding as to why we had these fears, but they nagged us continuously. All of these feelings and more were undercurrently present with us when the mother approached me this time. She wanted to forget all of it for a while because she felt we could not understand. She began to stroke me now, saying that she wanted to feel as she had felt when it was only she and I. She pulled on me, and I took a hold of her. She wanted me to touch her pains again. I had resistance to this at first, but then I remembered I had had the greatest pleasure when I had made her feel good first. I touched her and found more places of pain in her than I had ever found before. I didn't know why, but I wanted to blame the Father of Manifestation for this. I also felt blame toward the Mother, that she allowed this pain to build and now wanted me to heal it. I felt like she was trying to hold me responsible for her pain. I did not like feeling any of these things, and it seemed as though mentioning them might only make matters worse. The Mother felt guilty here and was trying to arouse passion in me in an effort to get me to overlook what we were feeling. I allowed her to succeed, because I did have feelings of love for her in which I could not overlook anymore. I plunged into her, and she let me know she loved it by exploding in light. She felt delicious to me, and I had light in every place I could find in her now. Instead of guilt, I was now feeling immense relief that she still loved me, and could still respond so delightfully to my advances. She opened to me like never before, and we felt ourselves expanding in light until we had to explode in the happiness of it. I knew that heart was present, but I did not let myself realize at the time that body was also present. I was feeling so much joy and release in the expanding light that I didn't look around to see where the Father of Manifestation was. The Mother was thrilled and exhilarated, and lifted higher than I had ever seen her before. I felt as though I had done it until I realized that heart had affected her also. I then felt ashamed of my feelings of wanting the Mother all to myself. I felt a rush of guilt that not only did I have these feelings, but I also wanted her to wait for me, and not open to others in this way when I was not around. The Mother would have loved it if I had come forward with this and made her feel wanted. But I did not tell her because at the moment I realized that our great ecstasy was now just due to the presence of the heart. The Father of Manifestation, I now realized, was with us also. I really had fear then that I was no longer enough for the Mother. I feared that I could not accept having the Father of Manifestation going into the Mother at the same time that I was, and yet Body was there with us because he felt he could not miss it. Even though he was unsure whether his presence was accepted or not, he had gone into the Mother and had not come out when she had come to me. The Mother felt ashamed and guilty that she had deceived me by letting me know the Father of Manifestation had presence within her, and the Father of Manifestation was afraid he had felt desire that was not right. Heart let me know that the Father of Manifestation had been present with us long before he manifested, and I knew this to be true. Nevertheless, I had feelings that were not at peace, and also a preference for ignoring these feelings because I did not like them. The Mother already had desire to get everything out into the open, and make light of it, so to speak, but she was afraid of displeasing me, and did not feel she could dare to try to prevail over me. She had felt me already, and so remained quiet of fear that an attempt to work it out might not bring the resolution she wanted. The Father of Manifestation did not like feeling afraid of me, and so he got angry at me instead, and told me that it was not right to feel like excluding him now that he had emerged, since he had been present all along. He said he wished he had not manifested if it meant that now he was going to be left out. He took the Mother and stomped off without allowing me to answer him. I felt guilty now that I had been unloving toward him, and I felt as though I should share the Mother with him, even though I had feelings that were not aligned with his. I went after them to make peace. I told them that heart had given me the understanding I needed, but I was having trouble accepting them. Will and Body said that they were having trouble also, and that they did not understand why there was also one feminine manifestation. Heart beamed his presence upon us, and we reached alignment at that time. The emergence of the ancient ones that serve the light. We felt fluttering feelings that intensified into orgasm and found ourselves surrounded by winged creatures. These first spirits were very large creatures. We had ancient ones now, the first order of spirits to emerge. They had great wings and hoary faces. Light streamed forth from their heads like hair dancing in the currents of the ethers, almost as though having life of its own. Eyes looked back at us now, great deep eyes that saw everything and had the reflection of it to give. These great creatures began fighting almost immediately about who would emerge first. The Mother had immediate guilt that she had made this happen, although she could not say how. We finally got them to line up and show us what each of them had experienced. Once we saw what they all had experienced, we could see that although there was a progression, they had emerged as a group and not one at a time as we had. There were 24 in the original order of ancient ones that served the light, but these spirits were fragmented now, so there appear to be many more. When these spirits originally emerged, they had just enough room to move around on their planet without getting in one another's way. The ancient ones had a desire to get smaller even then, and we had a desire to make them and give them more space. Even though we got them to settle down and stop fighting, the ancient ones still had undercurrents that made them feel they could not remain in the forms in which they had merged. The ancient ones had guilt that they had emerged looking so much like us, but at the same time, they were not aware that they had guilt. They had in fact been sitting within us, looking out at us, and saying to themselves how much better life would be without guilt. They had resolved to emerge without guilt and were sure that they had succeeded. Only now are they realizing that they got rid of their guilt by shoving it out of themselves, leaving it to find a home wherever it could. The ancient ones had a reflection to give us then that we did not recognize at the time. It was the reflection of how our judgments thought it would look to be without guilt. We were horrified by their lack of concern over what happened to others. These spirits were very self-serving, big and bright, as much as we enjoyed having company around us now. We also could not help but feel that they had perhaps grabbed too much light for themselves, a guilt we later had to realize we also had. The Ancient Ones said that they had emerged to have fun, and they did not like to be interfered with. They had appetites for more experience, and they intended to have it now. They began to romp around us in a ring, teasing us that we could not move past them unless they allowed it. They were claiming to have, as a group, more power than we had. We did not know if their claim was true or not, and we had fear that we had created something that we did not like. The Ancient Ones then claimed that we did not create them. They said that they had godlike powers, and that they had created themselves. I knew that they had not created themselves, but I had some guilt that it was not right of me to have become so attached to being God. I felt that I was wrong to have this attachment. I also did not like the way these Ancient Ones felt. Their guiltlessness had a hardness to it, and I did not feel to be loving. I had not realized that they were reflecting to me my own picture of how I feared a God without guilt would be. I had a feeling that I could not allow them to seize power over me. We had a great fight there in the beginning, during which I had to depend on the Father of Manifestation much more than I would have liked to if I really was God. I felt that I had been there first. I had gone through a lot to get where I was, and I did not want to allow anyone to stop me fulfilling my plans that the heart and I had spent so much time working on. I had plenty of fear as to what it would be like if the Ancient Ones gained control. I had a great desire to win this battle. Heart did not battle. He stood by and shone love on the situation. Body stood by me like the brother that Heart had said he was. The mother grew enraged at these new spirits, and when she gave them her rage, the Ancient Ones moved back. This was the first time I really saw how powerful emotions could be. The mother did not allow herself to rage for long when she saw what it could do, because her guilt stopped her. As soon as she stopped raging, these spirits had a desire to get away from her, but they could not move. Somehow she was holding them magnetized in place. Since this time, the Ancient Ones have learned to love the Mother, but it took them a very long time, and they still have much lost will that still holds the hatred they originally felt. The Mother both frightened them and commanded their respect, but they did not love her for a long time. The Ancient Ones were furious that they were not God, and they have had a lot of karma to work out in order to accept the position of close companions instead. The Ancient Ones have all worked on the original cause in their spirit vibration that is not on Earth, but they have a lot of lost will on Earth, including spirit polarized lost will, that has not yet been healed and balanced. Once the Mother again allowed the Ancient Ones to move, they resumed their emergence pattern. They had felt power as a group in this pattern, and returning to it gave them the strength to feel that they could tell us they had no guilt over what they had done. They said that they had felt they were right and not wrong, and that they had counsel to give. In fact, they told me that God would be better as a counsel than as 3 men fighting over 1 woman. The Ancient Ones had counsel to give all right, but it was not the counsel they thought it was. The reflection they have given me of myself has been the most important teachings I have received from them. At the time the Ancient Ones gave me these original reflections, I denied them, and thus did not gain the understanding at the time. I denied the reflections then because I did not think it was possible that all I could see were reflections of myself. Guilt told me it was egotistical to think that spirits could only reflect me. I was ready to believe it was not just my reflection that I saw because I did not like everything I saw. I had an image of myself as God at that time that did not include acting as these spirits had done. Lost will is heediness now. These spirits had challenged my position as God, and I wanted companions instead. Guilt made me feel that I should not hold back another spirit from being God if that spirit could do a better job than I could. I did not want the ancient ones to get my job, but I felt that I had to open to the possibilities that I might get replaced as God. Self-doubt. I had doubts now. Perhaps I had not created myself. Perhaps I had just come forward from the vastness in the same way that other spirits were now going to come forth. In the same way I had originally feared that I only thought I existed, I now had some fears saying that I may just have thought I created myself and everything else. For a long time I held on to the idea that another God might have come forth, and even tricked myself into believing that this was actually happening. In the beginning I had had the understanding that I am God, and that I created everything, but I had to go through a cycle of guilt and doubt during which I feared that I had deluded myself. It was my delusions of grandeur, paranoia phase. I could not allow myself to feel certain I was right to be God until I had experienced the possibility of God in other spirits. At the same time, I had denial in this area that did not allow me to recognize what was actually taking place. There was so much movement in my consciousness that I did not even realize how I was handling some things. They were just handled before I even noticed them. The healing I mean to bring to earth now is of the lost will that received everything I did not understand in myself at the time. Then I did not have intent to notice some things because I had fear I could not handle them. I did not know I had this intent to avoid, and I did such a good job of avoiding myself here that I did not even realize that I had fear motivating me. Then I was roaring nebulous of light, unsure if everything was me or not. Already I had spirit near the center of the nebulous telling me that they had intent to be God instead of me. We had searched the without, and I had already gone into the mother so many times that I thought I knew her. I thought I knew myself, and yet here were a bunch of spirits claiming they had come from someplace other than within me. We had not known these spirits before, which seemed to lend credence to their case. Guilt did not let me feel sure that these spirits were lying, because guilt told me it was unloving to accuse or distrust. The mother had guilt also, because she had hidden some things from me out of fear I would not accept them. Now she was afraid that these spirits had been hidden in places she had not wanted me to see. The Democratic Council. Guilt told me that if these spirits wanted to be God, they should have a chance to try it out. So I sat down and listened to these new spirits. I let them tell me how they wanted creation to take place. They wanted to have a democratic council and hold meetings about how it was going to be. I wanted to make love and let it happen. Hart said we needed a balance and he would help find it. Hart thought we could not all meet at once anyway because everyone had too much to say. Hart thought committees would be good. The mother could not stand to be present for any of these latest discussions. She felt it was unendurable enough that Hart and I had already gone through it and figured it all out. It made her furious that suddenly here were a bunch of upstart spirits acting like we did not know what we were doing. Her guilt over raging at them almost immediately upon their emergence caused her to stand present and act interested and open-minded when this was not what she was really feeling. She heard more than she wanted to hear until it gave her a desire to go off someplace and not return. The ancient ones had denied the mother in the beginning anyway, and had challenged only myself and the Father of Manifestation. The mother felt that these spirits did not see her as a valid part of God. The mother was still feeling both hurt and enraged at these spirits' rejection of her, and this was a large part, once again, of her desire to go off and not return. She wanted to rage at the ancient ones some more, but guilt was telling her this would not be a loving thing to do, and that she might not be right. The Father of Manifestation also had a desire to go forth and get away from these spirits, but he did not tell me at the same time. He tried to act in a manner he deemed to be reasonable, and so he also sat and listened to these spirits more than he really wanted to. Our false attention span gave these spirits an exaggerated sense of their own importance and profundity. I stayed longer than the father of manifestation, though. He had feelings for the mother that he could not hold back for long. He took to carrying her off and making love to her while I was sitting in council meetings with the Ancient Ones. I had feelings that it was not right to be sitting there instead of going ahead with what I wanted to do, but I had guilt holding me back. Guilt told me it was selfish not to give time to the Ancient Ones. I had a judgment now that guilt was giving me. I had impatience with these children, and I had realized that they were children who thought they knew better than their parents. Guilt told me it was unloving to be impatient with them. Guilt said that I did not have time for others, and that I preferred to indulge my own selfish interest instead. Sexual interest, in fact. Guilt also said that having sex was just going to get me more children when I was not even willing to do right by the ones I already had. I had a furious reaction to guilt then, an overkill reaction. Guilt told me later. I stood up, taller than I ever remember standing up before, and gave the Ancient Ones a lecture that they have never forgotten, although they have lost will still trying to prove me wrong. I told them that they were not God, but they only thought they were. I told them it was clear to me that they were only children meddling in the affairs of adults, and that while they thought they knew how to create, they had to realize that they had only formed things with essence that already existed. They could not create the essence itself, and so I told them they had to admit that they were one step removed from the source. The Ancient Ones had fear of me now, but they also had a desire to challenge me. I had a desire to go forth and not to be held back any more. I felt that I had to join the mother and the father of manifestation. They had been holding back orgasm, hoping I would join them. In spite of feelings that it might not be right, I could no longer hold myself back. I no sooner joined them than we had a great explosion of light, space filled with many more stars than were already there. We had a great loving feeling that we felt could not be wrong, but we also had a desire to make sure. We had a great soaring joy now that we had gotten release. There was more light than before, and also more speed.